My name is Ryan Preston. I'm a pen tester at Depth Security. I'm going to be talking about some new protections in Windows Server 2016 and Windows 10 Enterprise Edition. We'll start off with a little bit of background on Windows and the attack surface, and then we'll go into three specific technologies I'm going to be talking about, and then we'll do a little recap and going forward what the plan's going to be. So Windows Server 2016, it came out at the Ignite conference, so a while back now obviously, it's 2017, but we still see a lot of environments that are running Windows 2012 and even Windows 2008. It comes in three standard editions, the Standard Data Center and Essentials Edition. And anything you read, Microsoft definitely is touting all the new security features that they've been focusing on for these releases. And they are calling this the cloud-ready server environment with a lot of updates to Hyper-V. You can't probably really read this, but it's a kind of comparison dating back to 2008 R2, 2012 R2, and Windows Server 2016. I won't go through all these, but a few of the things you'll get with Windows Server 2016 that you can't backport to any of the other ones are the shielded virtual machines, Credential Guard, Remote Credential Guard, and Device Guard that we'll be going over in a little bit. Windows 10 Enterprise Edition. One thing Microsoft did kind of hold back some of the security features, so you do have to be on the Enterprise Editions to get some of these. Credential Guard and Device Guard. And some of the other features it comes along with are App Locker and Application Virtualization and the Microsoft User Environment Virtualization. They really focused a lot on virtualizing these environments to help better sandbox and protect all the credentials and the apps themselves. When they get exploited, the attackers can't really escape those sandboxes. So I'll run through a typical attack scenario here. I've got some stuff that I've got these really well-made diagrams that I created. And this is kind of going over when an attacker comes in from the outside, and it's usually pretty easy for attackers to get around inside your environments. So first up, we have our bad actor who's coming in and he exploits an application server, or one of your users opens an email they shouldn't have, and your attacker gets his initial foothold in your network. First thing up is to escalate up the system privileges, dump your local hashes, maybe run Mimikatz and pull some credentials out of memory. Here we've got a developer who's logged into this server, and you can't really see these keys, but when these developers are logged in with a lot of the current ways of promoting into boxes, you bring all your credentials with you. And so our attacker can actually just pick those right up off the box once he's on it and use those credentials to access other machines that he has rights to. A lot of times you don't even need the clear text credentials, you can just use the hash. So once you have that hash, you can pass that hash along with that username and jump into his box. Usually the kind of standard attack scenario is you pop a box, you enumerate that box, pull any of the credentials you can, search around the network and see if I have access to any other boxes with those credentials. And really what you're looking for are one of these highly privileged accounts. Here I've got a domain administrator with a little gold key. I'm really looking for a box that has his privileges. So this attacker notices that there's a developer server that this guy has a connection to, that these credentials are going to work on. So the same scenario where he's going to pass the hash again and jump onto that development server. But this time there's a domain administrator logged in, so it's the same routine. Load up Mimikatz, get your credentials, and now essentially once you have a domain administrator's rights, you own the network. You don't even have to actually move any further. You don't have to jump onto the DA's box anymore. You can just start using queries to the domain controller and pull all the credentials you need. One we're using nowadays is a DC sync, which essentially you're setting up so you tell the main domain controller that, hey, I'm a new domain controller on the network. I need to sync up with all the other DCs, so give me the database that has all the credentials in it so I can authenticate people to the network, and you have access to all the network shares now. And you don't even have to leave your box that you've already compromised, because all you need is those credentials. And so Microsoft has seen this and how easy it's been to move around their domains, and is now taking an assumed breach mentality. And this is from Microsoft CDP. And they really focused in Windows 10 in 2016 about lateral movement and privilege escalation. So now they know it's really hard to protect all your external facing boxes, especially with developers putting up machines for testing all the time and running older software. And so they're really focusing on, so once you do compromise a machine, let's not let them go anywhere or steal any of the creds that are on that box. And that kind of just leaves them stuck. So they have to actually find new exploits to compromise other machines instead of just moving around the network. And so, yeah, the problems that current enterprise environments are facing are the privilege escalation, lateral movement, and detection, because a lot of that last attack scenario, you're not dropping any EXEs or viruses onto the network. There's no antivirus going to pick it up. It's all ran in memory, and then once we have valid credentials, it just looks like another domain admin logging into boxes, or the developer just logging into other machines doing normal work. A lot of networks, it's also just a free-for-all of users in there. You might have to give access to contractors and other third parties, even your own employees with over-privileged rights, customers that maybe log into your environment, and you might already have adversaries in there you just don't know about. And it's just really hard to protect against all these in the current environments we're working with. There's a ton of ways attackers can grab credentials. Just simple stuff, keylogging and network sniffing, and then all those logon credentials that they bring along with them, spear phishing, mimikatz, and a lot of times we come up across environments where the users all don't have very many rights, but you have local admins and the password's the same across the whole environment. There's no lapse or anything implemented, and so with those local rights, I can then still log into all the boxes and try to find a domain admin. And same with lateral movement, where there's lots of ways everyone's moving around their network to do administration with remote desktop, or I've even seen some unauthenticated VNC sessions where I can basically just hit the endpoint and I'm already logged in with that user's credentials. And then the attackers never even need real clear text credentials now. We can just pass hashes and it lets you log in the same way. And there's a lot of new attack tools coming out that make finding some of those credentials a lot easier. We were using NetSesh, SMB login, and User Hunter to try to hunt down specific targets in a domain. A tool I've started to use a little bit more and appreciate is Bloodhound. Bloodhound essentially, once you compromise one machine, you can just query the DC with commands that aren't malicious or anything wrong with them. They look like normal commands, and it basically asks the DC for, tell me where all the machines are and tell me who's logged into all of them, because that's just public knowledge for the DC to have. Malcolm posted a picture of running Bloodhound in a large enterprise environment, and this kind of just maps out for an attacker the quickest path from where they're at to get a domain admin. And you can see these large environments, there's a ton of ways any of these boxes gets compromised, they can get to domain admin still. And Microsoft has been working on this because they understand it. So some of these technologies we're going to go over are Just Enough Administration, Credential Guard, and Device Guard. These protections are going to stop most people. There are going to be bypasses that come out, but at least you can kind of get to a least privileged type environment and hopefully protect some of those credentials. So Just Enough Administration. The main goals of Just Enough Administration, JEA sessions, are to reduce the number of administrators on your network. And that's not actually reducing the number of admins working on your network, but it's reducing the number of admin credentials that are out on your network. And you can also limit what those admins are doing. So they might need to be a domain admin, but on every box they don't need to have domain admin rights. They maybe just need local admin rights, which is a lot how JEA works. You are going to give them permission to still do all their work on a local machine individually, but not bring along all the rights for an attacker to steal with them. And then another thing is just, you can monitor your users a lot better now because you can set up to get transcripts running on all these sessions that they are initiating, and you'll have logs for later forensics or anything else you want to look at and see what they were doing. And the Tier 0 equivalency group. So most enterprises know that they need to protect their enterprise admins and domain admins, but there's a lot of other groups that can get to domain admin with the current rights that they have that aren't really looked at. One example is with server operators that maybe have access to your domain controller backups. Well, those backups are going to have the credential database that you can still steal as an attacker. And so if I get a server operator account, that's just like me getting a domain admin practically. So just enough administration. So like I said, it's supported on Server 2016 and Windows 10. They did backport a lot of this functionality if you install the Windows Management Framework 5.1. You can get limited support of most of the features as far back as Windows 7. It takes really just two files. There's role capability files that you'll set up, and there's session configuration files that will point to which roles you're going to be using for that session. They do have a GitHub out that's got some starter templates and profiles you can go look at. And so this is a role configuration file. You basically are setting up what you want this user to be able to do when they do remote into a box. And you can even set it up so much as to restrict what parameters a certain command can get. So if they're using a commandlet and it's a somewhat dangerous commandlet, you can even specify which parameters they can use with that commandlet so you can lock it down and make it even more restrictive. And you can pretty much load any command they're going to ever need on that box into these files, but nothing else. So it really is almost like whitelisting for that session specifically, what apps or what functions they're going to be able to use. This is showing just setting up the actual session configuration. So you're going to set your roles up based on groups in your domain. And like for this slide, we've got the Contoso domain with the JEA DNS admins. They get 3 different role capabilities that they can use if they're going to use or administer a box. And then so we set up the just enough administration file. We tell it what directory we're going to put the transcripts in and what roles we want that file to be associated with. They also offer a little test mechanism to make sure you didn't have any syntax errors or anything. But that kind of seems like a lot of work still, because it's going to take a lot of management. They did release the JEA Helper tool, which gives you a nice little GUI so you can set all these up and build these files in a little bit easier way to look around. So a little scenario here. We've got kind of a smaller version of our environment earlier, but we've got a Windows 10 box and a domain admin bird person here. And Evil Rick's hacked into Rick 10's box. Rick opened an email or was running a service he shouldn't have, and we got on his box. In the first scenario, the domain admin has remote desktoped in to do his work. And in the second, we've used a JEA session. And so from the attacker's perspective, the attacker is on the Windows 10 box here. So he drops the system, loads up incognito so we can view all the other sessions on the box and the tokens that came with it. And you'll see we've got a delegation token set up for bird person who's our domain admin. And it's really as simple as impersonating that user, dropping to a shell on that box. You can see once I impersonate them and drop to a shell, I'm running on that machine as that user. I check the domain admins group, and sure enough, I'm in the domain admins group. And at this point, you're pretty much owned, because I can either add new users if I want to be a little noisier, add them to the domain admins group. You could add yourself to the CEO's inbox. You could view his emails, or really just wreak havoc if you just wanted to blow the whole database away. Now the next scenario here, we've got our user, and this is actually entering a remote PowerShell session using JEA. At 1, we just set up the session, give it the configuration we're going to use, and it logs us into that box. So I gave this guy permission to run Who Am I, and to be able to stop a process, and only stop the process calculator. Because if you have calculators pop in, then you probably got owned already, right? The directory commands you can see here, they don't work either, so he can't even view the file system he's working on. He can only run those specific commands that he set up. And back in the attacker's perspective, same scenario where he's popped that Windows 10 box. He drops the system, loads up incognito to look for tokens. And you can see now we've got a JSA demo account that logs in. And by default, the JEA sessions do set up as local admin accounts on that box. You'll see his token does come with him, but it's his impersonation token. And the difference between those is like your impersonation tokens will allow you to impersonate that user and look like them locally on the box, but you won't have any of the network commands that he would have had normally. So he's using the same domain admin account and logging into this box, but none of his domain admin credentials come with him. So we can impersonate that same token, but drop to a shell, and I can run who am I, but I can't even query the domain for the other domain controllers. And just to kind of show, like, I can also impersonate that JEA session user, and they do have systems still on the machine because they're local admin, but I still can't make any queries to the domain, make any changes to the domain as the domain admin. And so, Credential Guard. It's a specific feature that's not part of Device Guard, and Microsoft's decided just to isolate where the passwords are going to be stored. And kind of talk about first what are credentials and what am I talking about, because credentials aren't just your username and password. A lot of times you'll maybe use single sign-on to log in, but there's a lot of derived credentials that come out of that. And the protocols use those, like NTLM or Kerberos, if you're remoting around where you don't need to log in anymore, but they are stored somewhere. Or you can use certificates, and a lot of times people are kind of getting even away from certificates and just using trusted keys. And traditionally, credentials were stored in the SAM database. That dates way back to like Windows 98, I think. And then they came out with the LSA secret that tried to protect it a little bit more and made it an isolated process that only system could talk to. And the difference between the LSAS process and the LSA secret is LSAS is just in-memory credentials. They don't persist through a reboot. The LSA secret will persist and come back the next time the machine's rebooted. And then on the domain controller, that file we kind of hinted at earlier, the ntds.bit, that contains all your users' usernames and hashes for the whole domain. And so like that's what the attackers are really trying to get to. Credential Guard is kind of a combo of hardware and software security that's going to protect the NTLM, Kerberos, and credential management credentials. And back to they really are emphasizing virtualized based security where they container everything into these virtualized processes, environments that only specific things can talk to. And the real end goal is to better protect you against these threats that are in your network and lingering around trying to steal any of these credentials. And really at the core with the virtualization is that your normal process stack now has an isolated virtual secure mode where that's where your new credentials are going to stay. And really nothing can talk to those. You use them to get onto the box, but then you shouldn't need them any longer once you're on the machine. Kind of in a little better view here. So the LSAS can talk to the isolated LSAS process, and it uses little remote procedure calls to talk to them. And this is kind of what the view is at a high level with Credential Guard enabled. So what's Credential Guard take? Unfortunately, it does take Windows 10 Enterprise. They really didn't lie when they said they were only protecting these enterprise users, because you won't be able to get this in your Windows 10 Home or Pro editions. And it is available on Windows Server 2016 as long as that server isn't acting as a domain controller. And so you'll need support for the virtualization-based security, 64-bit CPUs that support extended page tables in the Windows hypervisor, and secure boot. And for a few other features, you can install the trusted platform modules, the TPMs, and have UEFI lock enabled. And so what does Credential Guard protect specifically? Your domain accounts, Kerberos and NTLM credentials. So anything on the domain. So they really are focused on not worrying about the endpoint that gets compromised and just the lateral movement here. So you can't steal stuff that's going to get you anywhere else on the network. So for attackers, you still have local accounts. And so if your local admin password is reused across your network, you still might be vulnerable to getting total domain ownage that way. They don't protect the digest and CredSSP credentials, or if you have web logins that use your NTLM credentials or domain creds, the attackers can still grab those if you're using Credential Guard. But Device Guard comes in where, okay, so we kind of think we have our credentials protected, but what about the users moving around the network or dropping exploits to disk or anything? And Device Guard is another combination of hardware and software, and it's a key set of features that they're implementing to protect against malware specifically. You're going to control what runs in your environments and on your specific machines. It's basically a whitelisting tool, if you think about it that way. It's available on the Windows 10 Enterprise, again, only. You can get it in education, though, and Windows Server 2016. So antivirus, a lot of people are employing, and I don't know if anybody else follows Tavis Ormandy, but he can kind of prove that antivirus in some cases maybe makes you more vulnerable than you thought. And a lot of times they're based on just using signatures and identifying malware that way. Well, you're not going to really protect against unknown threats in that scenario because you don't have the signature for that, and they don't either, and so they can drop a obfuscated DLL or exe to disk and run it. Device Guard's taken the approach of, let's just treat everything on the whole operating system as malicious to start with. And so we're going to employ these code integrity policies that kind of say, we've trusted these applications, they're going to be fine to run. And so this is just some of the things that Device Guard will protect you against with the unknown malware, any unsigned code. So you might still have DXEs you say are trusted, but if they're not signed anymore and someone has reversed it or dropped a backdoor, like into a PuTTY is a common one that got backdoored recently, well, it might still look like they're running PuTTY, but there's a backdoor still sending a shell back to your attacker. It also is going to protect against the direct memory access attacks, and that's if you get a hard drive stolen or something and they have physical access to the device, it's going to protect against those, and bootkits and the kernel level malware. So you probably can't read much of this at all, but code integrity policy are basically XML files. They look a lot like the JEA configuration files, where you're going to specify what programs you've deemed are safe to run, and you can even specify what version of that program. So if you haven't approved the latest specific version of that program, it's not going to be able to run either. So it will take a little bit of work at keeping these up. Matt Graver kind of has put out a few articles on kind of some templates and what's going to protect you against most of the well-known bypasses for Device Guard and Credential Guard, and because there's a lot of even built-in Windows programs that are being used to launch other services, and so the original service is signed and accepted, but we can use that service to launch our malware. And those guys have been working real hard at making sure that they protect against all those too. And so, yeah, it's going to be hard to implement this, especially on your developer boxes. Casey Smith has kind of put this pyramid out of where to start in your environments. And you kind of start with your static devices, things that aren't going to get new software very often or updates, because you can lock those down really specific to only do their function that they need. And then you can move into your different departments that you have in your organization, like finance. You probably have a somewhat idea of what they're going to need to run most of the time, and you can apply a template to most of that department that should work. And then each department is obviously going to need its own template, but it shouldn't be too bad to set up. IT admins, it starts to get a little more difficult because these guys have to usually be testing new software and new types of deployments, and so they might have to change the way they work a little bit. And then of course the developers who are launching new things all the time and putting up servers and taking down servers and want their code to work, but it's unsigned and there's nothing working there. So those are definitely going to be the hardest to implement on, but it is possible. They just maybe have to change the way they work a little bit, or they're going to need to sign all their software before they deploy it. But it's definitely worth it, because even if you can start protecting at the bottom, you can at least start having some idea of what's not going to be happening on those devices, because you know they're locked down. And so, to recap, Microsoft's really taken this assumed breach mentality to heart, where we just want to make sure we protect all our endpoints from being able to go anywhere else. So they understand it's really hard to protect the whole outside. You don't know, especially in big companies doing development work, what is being left out there, and tracking all of your internal IPs and everything when these complex networks are changing so much. It's really difficult. So we're going to try to limit that post-exploitation, and so it'd make it a lot harder for these attackers to have to find new exploits on every single machine they want to compromise. And then we're also going to limit where all these admin credentials are across your network. A lot of organizations just keep giving more privileges to users because it's the easier way to do it. But now we can specify just in specific session configurations, well, we can still give you full admin rights, but we're not going to give you a way to take all your credentials for the whole network to get on with you. And just go for your easy wins first. The easiest and like your critical devices that aren't going to have a lot of new software going up for are going to be the easiest to implement. These are a bunch of guys that I kind of follow, and they also work on a lot of the bypasses that come out, but they're also working on fixing those bypasses. And I mean, most of it's a lot of PowerShell work. 80security.org is a really good site to follow. They have a lot of good stuff where, like, these are the guys that are coming out with the new ways to break 80, but they always end with, well, how we fix this, or got this reported to Microsoft. I think Sean Metcalf runs that site. He's like a Microsoft certified master of everything or something like that. That's it for me. And if you guys have any questions or just want to raise your hand, I can throw you a t-shirt. That works too. Sweet. There's one. Yeah. Yeah. It'll block all. You can specify commands, functions, custom commandlets, PowerShell modules that you specify. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
You said it might take some time to set up. Does the time to set up circumstance developers working with cause him to go and find some creative way of getting to the posture?
No. Most of the time with setup is just making sure that you aren't preventing them from doing the work, and that's why I kind of, in Casey, suggest to start with your devices where you know there's not too much going on, and kind of get used to setting and building up these configuration files, because those are going to be the easiest. I recommend starting from their templates, because the ones Microsoft has, they've found even bypasses in their default templates they have posted. And so these guys have been kind of working like, well, we find ways around this. You start with these templates and then kind of work your way from there, yeah.
Where do these templates and configurations live?
On the endpoints themselves. So, no, I might have missed over that part. Yeah, you'll need to deploy these for the session configuration files will be on the host that they're launching from, and then the abilities files will be sitting on the endpoint. So when they come in and say, this is I'm this kind of user, what kind of rights am I supposed to have? That machine will know what roles to associate with it.
So there's potential there for security issues with templates.
Yeah, and those templates do also get signed, and so they need to be signed and verified also. And so that way you can't just log in and modify the template and then just bypass it that way. Because that'd be a simple way to bypass. But you will have to do some testing to make sure you're secure there.
So you said it has to be 2016. If you update Scheme at 2016, 2016 and 2012 domain controls to pick up that ability?
You can get some of these abilities if you don't have to update the forest functional level or anything. You just need to update the Windows management framework up to I think 5.0 is when it started implementing some of these, and then 5.1 kind of added a bunch more features. On that slide earlier, it kind of talked about what you can get further back, which Just Enough Administration is available all the way back to 2008. But some of the Credential Guard is only still available regardless on 2016 and Windows 10 Enterprise because of how they do the virtualization. Those older machines won't be able to do that.
Does device guard run by default on any deployments like one domain controller?
Not that I know of it. It doesn't run by default because I think it would lock everything down too. They do have default templates built in that you can enable, but it won't be turned on just because you have Enterprise running. Yeah.
So, just kind of for reference as well, Microsoft, as you probably know, has released 2 papers, actually version 1 and version 2 of mitigating past the hash. Awesome, great.
Yeah.
I think it may probably encompass some of the JEA stuff that's put in there.
Yeah.
Bigger overarching architecture in terms of how to mitigate that type of thing. Some of the other things that you talked about in terms of protecting the LSAT, I know Microsoft has done some really good work around that in terms of code signing and only allowing specific executed DLL all specific LSATs.
Right.
And they have specific event IDs associated with those that are calling it that are not assigned.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the detection can show up where it'll start alerting you when it thinks there's a pass to hash happening or if someone's trying to access that memory, but that's all going to be built into 2016 in your administrative consoles.
Yeah,
But
some of it back, pieces of backwards in 2012 R2.
yeah, you get limited support, and back on 2008 R2 too, we'll have some limited support. But yeah, updating the management framework 5.1 will help you get some of these protections. At least with Just Enough Administration, that's pretty fully fledged all the way back to 2008. Yeah. Any other questions? We're good?
Awesome.
Thanks.
Let's see if we can get it going.